So we're up to 34. So I'm going to just kick it off here, talking about swim meets. And both swimmers and parents, the idea is to educate, inform, collaborate. So before we even get to the swim meets, you'll kind of have a better understanding of what we're really after, why we make decisions the way we do. And I know we touched on it the last talk we had. But the one thing I wanted to go further into was best events. And I think I mentioned this before. If I haven't, I'm repeating myself. But it's oftentimes that swimmers will begin their career being very competent and very able in certain events at certain distances, which maybe, in my example, as a 10 and under, it was 200 breaststroke. And then 11 and 12 was something else, 200 backstroke. Then 13, 14, it was 400 IM, 1500 free. 15 and over, I ended up being more of a sprinter in the 50, 100 free and the 100 fly, and I ended my career off like that. So the idea and the concept of all-round development and teaching all the strokes and teaching all the ranges of events is really important, not from just a practice point of view, but a competition, a swim meet point of view. And so we'll have, as I said in the last meeting, earlier in the season, we may swim off events, off distances. And, you know, the challenge comes into when you have best events that a lot of time the athletes want to swim those a lot. And that's understandable, but we also have to be able to develop the other sides of it. So, for example, in a 200-meter swimmer, their 200-meter time is really dictated by two things. One, their speed, and number two, their endurance. So someone can have a lot of speed in the 200 and be out flying at the 75 and really crash and burn in the last 125 if they're not fit. And similarly, someone who is very fit and distance oriented just doesn't have the speed to get out fast, but comes back really strong. And so, you know, you try to address the weakness on the sprint oriented person to build their power endurance and build their back end through some conditioning work. And on the other end, you have people that are super fit and maybe not that flat out fast. And you also address some of that speed. So you have to do that sometimes in swim meets, where to bring about the 200, you would enter them in a couple 50s or a couple hundreds and get that speed up so that their baseline, right, dictates that they can go out faster. So I think if you look at the girls or guys 200 free world records, they're going out around 2 to 2.5 seconds over their best 100 time. It's fast. Like the 200 is a controlled sprint. It's not a mid-distance event. 400, 800 are mid-distance. 1500, 5K, and 10K, those are distance events.
Oh.
Okay, someone has their mic on. Anderson Lee, and someone who has iPhone, your mics are on. So that's why we have these range of events that we like to swim. So even someone who's in 100 backstroke, the 400 free development helps their last 25 of the 100 backstroke, i.e. my example before that Kylie Mass has gone 403 short course 400 freestyler, right? What was the world record holder in the 100 backstroke. So these complementary events have to be developed, right? I'll pick for an example, Dylan Scholes, who excels more in the 100. But I remember her going in to a swim meet and I put her in the 800 and she went 9:15 long course. And that's just by being generically fit, just from our program. It's not her specialty. She just jumped forward because she was a lot fitter and a lot better athlete at that point, right? And similarly, we'll see people that have more of a 400 and up specialty that can get up and swim a great 100. You know, if you look at Michael Phelps and look at his split on the 100 freestyle, and, you know, he's 200 fly, 400 IM, you know, world-class 1500 guy, and he almost broke the American record leading off the relay. So again, those swimming down to events, very, very important. So the topic of best events, a lot of times people will be a little bit hesitant to have any events before their best events. And what we want to discuss today is that that's not necessarily a good thing. You don't want to remove all those hurdles and all those kind of events beforehand to preserve the 50 free, especially the younger you are, right? The younger you are, the more events you need to swim. You know, it used to be, my rule of thumb used to be 3 events a day plus relays. And unfortunately, as competition has gotten really thick in the last couple of years, and we have swim meets all over the place, and they would restrict how many events you could actually go into. So at provincials, you're only allowed to swim, I think it's 8 events over 4 days, maybe even more. So it hasn't become that tough to really race a lot of events because they're limiting number of events over a number of days. But the younger you are, the more you need to swim multiple events and learn how to handle that. It develops toughness, it broadens your spectrum, right? And what we don't want is to specialize too early. And things like this is where the conundrum happens. A swimmer is getting close to provincials. Well, they have the 200 IM, and then 2 events later, they have their 100 fly, and that's their event they're trying to qualify for provincials in. The process-oriented approach to that is that you make it while swimming the 200 IM and not doing everything to remove the hurdles, because you want to qualify for provincials in a situation where you can go forward to provincials and improve. The qualification is just the stepping stone to get to the meet. But you don't want, and some people will say, well, we really need to go and have the experience and get to provincials. But what if it's a bad experience? We want to set it up, and that's going to happen sometimes anyways. But it's important that you can try to get to the cut that allows you to enter the meet. That's all it is. It just lets you enter the meet. It's a great accomplishment. It's really good for goal setting, but that's what it is. It allows you to go to regional Bs or Olympics. It just lets you go. The second part is the preparation for performance. That's when you would start getting more prepared for those single events, and maybe you wouldn't have at provincials, you wouldn't select a bonus event right before your best event, obviously, because that's your peak pinnacle competition. Okay, but that kind of that thought process still extends. You wouldn't just swim your best event and not swim relays and not swim any development events. So that's part of what makes it a better athlete. That's part of what makes you experience that and be able to have a higher value. So when we go into provincials or an invitational or a nationals or above, that there is your focus event and there's supplementary events. And don't you know that sometimes those other events that maybe weren't currently your best, you step forward and actually do better in, because maybe you were more relaxed, you weren't as over-focused, right? Or you found that, you're just getting better in those events and really blossomed through. So in that respect, you don't want to eliminate all those other events to be able to swim, okay? And the final thing I'll talk about with those best events at swim meets is rarely is it beneficial for you to scratch. When we get to the point where you're having to scratch events and focus everything in to be able to just qualify for the meet, there becomes too much of a pressure. And same thing with getting time trials. Unless the situation is really good and really prepared, most people won't make their cut in time trials. They will do it in an environment where they're in a position to do well. They've got what's called perceived competency. And what I mean by that is the athlete believes and sees that they can actually do well. They can see it, they can believe it. It's that perceived competence. And so sometimes you'll take an athlete to an easier swim meet where they know that they can win, or they know that they can medal, or they know that they can final, because their confidence is high, the situation and environment's created so they can do really well, and that will get them through to the standard, or that will build their confidence from doing really well. So in swim meet selection, we do try to find competitions that are a little below their level, right at their level, and then one above their level. Okay, and it's usually like 3, 2, 1, 3 below, 2 at, and 1, or maybe it's 2, 3, 1, depending on the selection of competitions. But scratches are a very rare thing with us, especially if it's in finals. And we won't be talking or entertaining too much about, well, I'm really tired because I swam 2 events this morning in a relay, so I don't really want to swim that other event. That's not a championship mindset, right? We want to be able to get up and view it the right way. You've got 2 opportunities to improve. You've got 2 more opportunities to develop that event and learn, okay? We wouldn't just focus on that one. Again, unless it was Olympic trials or, national finals or making nationals. That's a little different, because the developmental stepping stones to go from regionals to provincials to Easterns or Westerns to invitationals, those steps are pretty sequential. They're relatively small increments. But when you go from an Easterns to a Nationals, it's a really big jump. And then from qualifying from Nationals to getting the second swim at Nationals is another big jump. And then a monumental jump from being a national level swimmer into a Canadian junior national level or an international where you're actually representing Canada or your province. So those jumps get really big as you go through, okay? So scratches are not something that we'll be doing a lot of. And especially as we head down the road and we sometime in the future get to compete at provincials, I mean, we're going to be in a situation where, you know, we want to do well as a team. We want to move forward at the national or Eastern or provincial level. So it's not about how good you are in the one event, especially when you're 15 and under. Okay, it's about the multitude of events, relays, depth of relays. Can you field a 4x200? Can you do 4x100s, right? Can your freestyler that's maybe a 200 dominant swimmer swim down to the 100 and up to the 400 and maybe even score points for the team in the 800? Okay, or did that breaststroker break through in the 400 IM and be able to score points for your team? Those are all very, very healthy, good things. Because if you specialize too early, it's not like you're going to go from a 50 breaststroker when you're 12, and then when you're 17, you're going to be qualified for nationals in the 2, 4, 800 free, the 100, 200 fly, the 200, 400, 200 back. That rarely happens. It's usually the other way around. Okay. If there's a consideration of scratches, again, this is like very rare, almost never will happen. That would be a conversation that you would have with your coach, and the coach-athlete tandem would make that decision. So just for parents out there, never email or phone the coaches about having the children scratch out of an event. That's a coach swimmer dynamic decision that, you know, we need to make and that you need to support. And sometimes I'll even be the one that comes and makes the decision. You know what? We're not going to swim the 100 fly because I think it ruins your tempo for the 200 fly the next day. Again, this would be a higher level kind of swimmer. Or, you know, we're not going to swim the 50 free because, you know, you've got 200 back, 400 IM, and those events you're more likely to get finals in at regionals or something like that. Sometimes it'll be a coach-led decision. Okay. The next, no questions yet, eh? Come on, guys. I don't see anything in the chat. Along the lines of swim meet entry is travel. So I talked earlier about having competitions below your personal level of ability, at your level of ability, and then something that's over your head. And I already spoke with going to a lower level competition so you build your confidence, you get more racing, you get more finals, gain experience. There's a time when you take an athlete to a competition where they get their backside whooped. You want that. You want them to see what real swimming is, or the next level of swimming is. You want them to go, oh, you know, I thought 30 for the 50 free was pretty good, but that guy just went 27.9. And you get that exposure to that next level of swimming. I'm going to back up for a second. Traditional age groups were 10 and under, 11 and 12, 13, 14, 15 to 17, and then senior. And the thing that was really good about that was that you were either at the bottom of your age group or the top of your age group. And when you're at the bottom of your age group, the goal was, and the way that I would coach athletes in that bottom year age group was, how far can you move up the ladder respective to whatever level you are. If it was at regional level, it's how far up the ladder can you go at a regional level in the 11-year-olds, try to get to the 12-year-olds before you turn 12. And if you were the bottom of the age group, you really learned how to fight and really go hard in the mornings. Because most likely if you were 11 in the 11 and 12 category, you had some work to do to get up to the 12-year-olds. And it was fantastic because it developed athlete tenacity. It developed their desire to race against faster people. These single age group categories, which is kind of what we have, I think it does a disservice to that part of development. On the good side, it's getting more people to be more successful more often, but we have to be careful with that it doesn't give them a false sense of where they really fall in the swimming world, right? So the bad part is, hey, my son won provincials as an 11-year-old, set a record as an 11-year-old, and now is kind of the bottom of the 12-year-olds. Well, age group development varies greatly. You know, you may have some young boy that's 12, almost turning 13, to the boy that just turned 11, and 2 weeks ago he was 10. So the bad part of that is you could have almost a 3-year gap between the bottom and the top. The good part was it developed that toughness to compete. So these single age groups have kind of done away with that. Okay. I'll just finish my train of thought before I get to the question there. So when you're moving through that, if you were at the top of your age group, it was really good because you most likely were making finals, you were doing well, maybe winning, and you were gaining that confidence and building that. That was the good part. And so what I really liked was you kind of went, climb the ladder, get to 12, go back down, 13, climb the ladder. You have to face what the 14, almost 15-year-olds are doing. When you turn 15, then you were competing against 17-year-olds that were almost turning 18. And that was really tough, especially for the guys. But as I said in the last broadcast, those guys that are with the Lucas Warmold What's Up Wednesday, those guys that had to struggle and fight and stick with it, they actually built the character and the work ethic and the skills and the habits that would make them successful, because it was the only way they could get better. Okay, so when we go through, we're talking about these events, we're talking about scratches. That's something important for us to remember. Okay, before I go on to my next topic, the question, if you want to improve your IM, should you focus more on your best stroke or your worst stroke or all of them? What are exceptions for scratching an event? Okay. Well, first of all, the IM part, I'm a big believer that your worst stroke is your biggest opportunity for improvement. I am a coach that really believes in dwelling on the athlete's positives, building upon things they really do well, because when they can do those things well, it builds confidence. And swimming is a confidence game, for sure, times 1,000. But burying your head in the sand and not addressing your weak points, you're not going to be as good as what you can do. So I guess the answer is both. You still dwell on the positives, and you look at the weak points of your strokes as opportunity. It's not that I suck at breaststroke kick. It's I got to work on my breaststroke kick a lot. And here's how I'm going to do it. I'm going to do breaststroke stretch. I'm going to be able to do, more breaststroke kick per week. I'm going to do some squats. I'm going to run a little more. I'm going to address that side of it. But great question. The exemptions for scratching an event: illness. If the athletes come through some sort of injury, right, that we don't want to overload them. So we may go, okay, this morning we're going to swim the 200 back, but that's it for today, because I don't want to give you too much. If it gets to a point where, say, that swimmer was the fourth person that was going to complete the relay to go to provincials, then we would do everything we could to try to get that athlete through, because it was beneficial to 4 people, right? So again, it was a team kind of focus. There are other exceptions, but I think the exception kind of proves the rule, and that we just need to know that 8.9 times out of 10 we're not going to scratch. Okay, whoever's logged in as iPhone, your mic's on, please. Where does relay prep fit into training? Great question, and something we overlook and forget a lot. And it's good that you brought that up, because when we get back to some sort of normalcy in training where we can actually come within 6 feet of each other, that's something that's really, really good to do. So I like doing relay stuff when it's a speed day. For younger swimmers, I think it's a great way to finish off the week, coaches. I think it's a great way to reward things. Okay, so you might pick your reward. I'll give you an example. When I was in Nanaimo, It was really commonplace for the athletes to say the word sucks, right? This sucks. My kick sucks. This practice sucks. And it's a pretty negative word. So I said that word's now illegal, right? So one, there was a penalty if you said it. I don't know, it might have been a 200 fly or something like that. And then number two was the other side was the reward for the group. And I said 3 or less for the week. 3 times I hear that word or less, then you'll get relays at the end of the week. So we would reward that kind of behavior that we're looking for. So the relay prep is a reward. It's also something that's good for speed work. And I would say, for 14 and under, it's a nice way to finish off the week, or maybe go, fast Fridays and do something like that. Okay, keep them coming, guys. It's only about 2 or 3 there. The next discussion was about travel, and I already talked about how you have competitions that were lower, mid, and above where you're at. I've touched on that. But then we go, why do we travel? This is a really important one for parents to understand, because the opportunity for us to stay local is great. We've got hundreds of swim meets going on in the GTA area every weekend. So the need to travel in terms of being able to get to a competition is low. But we need to be able to take the athletes out of their local area and race people they don't know, because there's such thing as pigeonholing. And what I mean by pigeonholing is that, if you're swimming 200 IM, and historically in the athlete's mind, they go, oh, this person from Crescent Town is usually here, and this person from Cobra is usually here, and I usually fit in here, and that's kind of where I think I'm going to be. There's a danger of that happening. So it's good to take them out of their environment and go race other people, because they just don't know, hey, this person from, West or Windsor, I really have never raced them before, and it's good and healthy for them to do that. Or we pick opportunities for competitions that serve Markham's best interest. And I'll back up a little bit with that. Maybe 5 or 6 years ago, Swim Ontario had made the decision to put provincials in Brantford. Now, if you don't know the old Brantford pool, they've done a lot of renos to it, so it's different now. But Brantford pool is a bit of a slow pool. It's a little shallower. The lanes are a little narrower. The lane ropes are a little smaller. It's not a really good gutter system. So it creates a lot of turbulence and waves, and it's not the greatest of pools, not like ours. And here we have our championship meet of the cycle of the half of the year, and we're putting it in a slow pool. And historically, it had really bad air circulation, and almost always we would have athletes get sick coming right off it, or they couldn't even finish the meet. They'd be coughing so bad, and they'd have the 3-day cough in their throat, and oftentimes it was just unhealthy. So I made a decision, and I gave the board a heads up that this is the reason we're not going to go to prevent. We're not going to go to our own province's championship meet. We're going to go to the ManSask, Manitoba Saskatchewan Combined Championships in Winnipeg. And the reason is, A, the standards are a little bit easier. No, A was it was a fast pool. B was it had great air, so our athletes weren't going to be subjected to that kind of business. Number 3, the standards were a bit easier, so we could take a bigger team and get more athletes exposed to heats and finals, because traditionally the prairies are undersubscribed number of swimmers, and the level of swimming is generally lower. So our swimmers have a better chance of making second swims, and hence perceived competence, get more experience racing finals, get more experience maybe medaling where they never had won medals before. And so it was in our best interest for our club and for our swimmers to do that, where the Brantford meet was going to be, you couldn't swim as many events because the standards are harder to control the size of the meet. So they'd only go in and swim 2 events plus relays, where they could go and swim 2 events a day, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and relays, and a better pool, and a better environment, right? But it's going to cost $1,000 more. But my argument was that investment is going to be way better for the experience of the child, right? And outside of 2 or 3 kids, we took 60 something kids to Mansask and we won the meet, and it was awesome. It was great. Took like 6 or 7 chaperones. And it was a really good opportunity. Now, it probably didn't sit well with Swim Ontario that the national champions didn't come to their own provincials, but when I made that decision and I talked to Coach Bill O'Toole at Toronto Swim Club, I talked to Coach Murray Drudge at NIAC, and Markham might have been there as well. I can't really remember. I think Coach Rob might have taken him. And London Aquatic Club, all of us went to Winnipeg because of that situation. Well, Swim Ontario kind of realized what we were doing, and to their credit, they changed things around. They changed the format a bit. They opened up the senior category, and they made sure they were hosting provincials always in a fast pool. Markham, TPATS, Etobicoke, London, Windsor, that sort of thing. Because then they would have the support of all the coaches in the province. So, you know, my interest was doing what was best for the club and for my swimmers. I really didn't. The province's needs came behind ours, right? And when I'm looking at a family spending $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a year, I want to try to find opportunities that are going to maximize the opportunity for those athletes. And if we don't have it here, we're going to go find it somewhere else. And those are the decisions you have to make to be able to build your team and be able to facilitate the stepping stones and the quantum leaps that you want. But yeah, we could have gone to the Burlington Invitational with heats and finals and been 10 minutes down the road and have no hotel and no flight. And by the way, no excitement, no thrill, no learning curve. It's the same people they raced 2 weeks ago and last month. It becomes boring. The other thing with those travel meets is it's a heck of a reward. It's a huge reward. And by the way, 85% attendance or higher, or you can't go. Usually we would have a criteria for travel that would be 3 meet qualifying times to be eligible to go. So you qualify in 3, you get bonus events plus relays, then the value is there to go. If you're only qualifying in the 50 breaststroke, right? Even if they gave you 3 bonus swims, the likelihood of you getting second swims was very low. It's probably better that we went to a lower level competition so that that athlete could get more exposure, more opportunity. So we had our own threshold. We would have our own threshold to go to the meet as Markham Aquatic Club. That would not be the case if it was juniors, like Easterns, CJCs, Summer Nationals, because those are national championship events. You could go and swim 50 breaststroke, you know, because you're qualifying at a national level. That's different. Okay. So we talked about pigeonholing. We talked about why to travel. You know, at times, like if it's October or January, sure, we'll stay local. We'll stay very cost effective. But we need to be able to, you know, if we believe in providing a program for every individual to reach their maximum potential through all the things we believe in, that means that we have to take care of every level. So if we have people that are top 25 in the world, yeah, we're going to go down to Texas and do the US Grand Prix meet, because if you're top 25 in the world, it means 24 people are better than you. That's it in the world. So you can go down to Texas and realistically swim in the final. You'll make the final and it will be worth the experience. But you got to be able to compete against those people. Okay? So that's kind of meet selection thought process and all that sort of thing. The last note I had here was regarding hotel rooms. And hotel rooms on team travel, we would generally try to match up a junior swimmer with a senior swimmer. Unless they were in separate sessions, then you know you don't want some kids that they're getting up, you know, they're going to go to the pool at noon or 1 o'clock. You don't want them getting woken up at 6 o'clock because the seniors are going to the pool early. But we do have those kind of scenarios where we try to pair up a buddy system outside of bedtime. So if they were having lunch, for example, we would maybe have the seniors pair up with juniors and things like that. With rooms, generally 99% of the time, we would not take requests from parents that, you know, Johnny wants to be with Billy. We would as a coaching staff, we would make the room lists based on what we thought was best for the athletes, not necessarily best buddy, because there's a likelihood they'd be staying up really late talking. Or maybe there was a conflict in the team and we felt it was better if that person wasn't with that person. We would make those decisions. So before we even get to that point, we would ask, unless there's a really, really special case, we wouldn't really take in requests for who roomed with who. Okay. So that's what I've written down today, was a little bit of discussion on team travel and swim meet selection, some guidelines and general philosophies about how to get to certain meets, why we would put in our own standards of maybe 3 qualifying times before we go. And this is the way that, over a decade that I built my last club to be over 500 members, 3-time national championships. I think we won summer provincials 6 out of 10 years. And that's kind of some of the things you need to do that is different than the norm. The year that we went to the Mansas provincials, Etobicoke chose to stay and they killed everybody because no one was there. Most of the competition had gone. And I'm not sure that's really good. Like winning with no competition isn't really valuable to me. Okay. So next question, what are your opinions about travel meets interfering with school? Oh, great. That's always something that comes up. So yeah, if you haven't done that before, there's a process to go through of talking to your teachers, talking to the principals well beforehand that you've got this competition coming up. We're flying to Edmonton on Thursday, we're flying home on Monday, so they're going to miss Thursday, Friday, Monday of school. Being proactive, great. And with today's kind of technology, you can do stuff on the plane. You can do stuff in between heats and finals. You can get on your computer and do that. You can read a textbook on the plane. The other side of that is parents' comfort level with leaving school to be able to have their athletes compete. And what I can tell you is that there's a process, right? There is a learning curve for those athletes to understand that, this is really important that you stay up on your schoolwork because you're going to miss that. And it certainly should be a reward. If they're not doing well in school, then sure, you can take that opportunity away from them. But my experience over the last 2 decades has been that when parents don't allow kids to miss school to go to competitions, 90% of them eventually will quit the sport because there's just no motivation or incentive for them. You have to remember that these travel meets are a huge incentive. And when you stare at a black line and you're training, say if you're 11 and 12-year-old, you're training 5 or 6 times a week, you're getting up early Saturday morning, maybe you're getting up early on the weekday morning for months before a really big competition. It's not like running where you can take a different route and get a different exposure, right? My environment can change. Well, today I'm running on the treadmill, tomorrow I'm running by the river, the next day I'm running in the hills, the next day I'm running in the park. You can change stimuli. We don't have that at MPAC. We can't press a button and have birds and all that around us one day and then we're in the ocean the other day. So it's really important in the athlete's development. And I would argue, as a parent myself, the life experience of these athletes traveling is well worth it. By the time that our athletes get to 15, 16, 17 years old, they are more well-traveled than most university students. And that in itself has a value that we can't really touch on. Okay. Does that kind of answer your question about meets interfering with school? And I understand how important school is. I really do. But I've found that where there's a will, there's a way. And people that are very serious about their academics are usually very serious about their swimming, and they find a way to make it work. Okay. Any other questions? How do you decide what meets to taper for? Okay. So Traditionally, we'll have training blocks or site microcycles within the macrocycle. A macrocycle is a year. Microcycle is usually 3 to 4 months or 12 weeks. And so we would typically taper, or let's use the word peak. We would aim to peak at the highest level competition before we broke for Christmas. So it might be OJI, it might be, say, the Nyack Youth Cup, it might be a Markham meet that we're hosting in the future, the first or second week of December, or something like that. And then we'd break for Christmas, we'd get back to training, and we'd go through January, February, March. And depending on the level of athlete, whatever your highest level competition was, same thing, whether it was, Ontario Youth Juniors or provincials. But again, we would go through a preparation phase and then perform. Okay. A lot of this is based on your group. Your group as a whole be focused on, hopefully the goal is that the center of that bullseye for that group, the majority of athletes are at that level. So for me, it would be national championships or higher, right? And certainly the trials being in April.
我给你这个发这边，你干嘛又挪过去干什么？
Somebody's mic's on.
为什么？
Rhiannon.
I like this.
And then, of course, at the end of the season. So typically we'd have 3 peaks per year. One in December, one in the March, April range, and then one at the end of the season, depending on whatever the highest level was that you got to. Now, sometimes you have double tapers or double peaks because, let's say you prepared and you came down, you got fully prepared for Summer Nationals, and you got selected to the World Junior team. Well, then you'd go on 2 more weeks, right? You join in and you come back to your club, get ready. At some point you would join in with the national team, and then you would go to the competition. Any more questions? Just fire them away on that. How many Big Mac travel meets are you planning for one season? In the past, we've been to Gatineau. So it would kind of graduate from level to level. I really like the other thing I didn't mention about team travel is that oftentimes we don't get the chance for our older athletes to mix with our younger athletes. And the learning that goes on, I'm going to call it legacy information or legacy attitude, legacy mindset from those older, more successful athletes transitioning down. So, in my old club, there was a 13-year-old girl that was coming up really quickly in the group below, and you could see that she was keeping an eye on Mabel. She would make sure that she was showing up early. It became a competition for her to get to the pool as early as Mabel or earlier. And we actually had to tell them, okay, girls, you don't need to be there 40 minutes early. But the point was, this girl was just soaking in everything from Mabel to try to be that good. And so when you go on team travel meets, and especially if you can get meets where everybody's swimming in the morning and everybody's swimming at night, maybe the 11 unders swim in the afternoon, but you get a transfer of knowledge, and you get, a 12-year-old being able to watch Alex Axon go 354 long course 400 free. It means something. It's valuable, right? People pay money to go see that kind of swimming at swim meets. So I'd love to get a really big meet going where we'd have everybody, but to answer your questions, in terms of one season, it would depend on the age and ability level of that athlete. Okay, so again, maybe the Gatineau one in December sounds like a great idea, or the Prairie Winter meet in Winnipeg in December. Winnipeg in December is a lot of fun. Just got to make sure you dress warm enough. And then what I've done before is that we could also take a group of athletes to provincials, and then the next weekend go to Mansass Provincials. Or we had a Mansass Provincial group only, and it was a lot bigger, and we went there. So it kind of depends on the ability level and the age of the athlete. Any other questions? I understand the school concern. a lot. But as I said before, I think with today's technology and being disciplined, you can get a lot done on the bus, on the drive, at the hotel, even if it's just a half an hour. You come back, you have lunch after you've done your heats, you have lunch, you do 30 minutes of homework time. And on team travel meets, I always designate a blackout time. And a blackout time means no TV, no electronics, no games. It's time for your nervous system to relax. And some people, I know, some people don't adhere to that. It's the minority, and they're just hurting themselves, but eventually they learn, or they don't. If they don't, then that's kind of, everybody has an equal opportunity to become unequal. But the majority of athletes that are thinking the right way will take that blackout time, and science has shown us that it's really, really important. So after we did our homework, then we would do that. Same thing with training camps. I would designate, okay, this time you guys should either have blackout time or do some homework. Okay. So any more questions? No? I answered all the questions? Come on. Otherwise, I'm going to have to sign off early. All right, so it doesn't look like there are any more questions. I hope you guys found this helpful. If anything comes to mind over the next day or so, feel free to send me a note, an email, a message, a text, anything you like. My contact info is on the website, and then we can go from there. I think for next week, I will do by request only. So if we don't get any questions, then we won't do one next Friday. We'll wait till the Friday after, okay? Shoot me a message. Let me know if there's anything that you found helpful. I'd like to know if you found something helpful so I can just keep that in mind. And again, if you have anything for next week. Okay, thanks guys. Have a safe weekend, and you're welcome, everyone that's saying thanks. Some of you will see Monday, otherwise next Wednesday. I haven't decided who I'm going to have yet, but we'll go from there. Bye guys.